Here we are again. Thanks, guys and girls, for joining us today. This is another episode of the Tesla Motors Club podcast. I'm Mark.
I'm Lewis.
And I'm Mike.
Today is kind of our European version, gentlemen. We have a guest who's going to be from Hungary that we'll introduce later. He's going to come on and give us a lot of information about some things in his side of the world. But some of the other topics we'll talk about today is Giga Berlin, what's going on out there. You know, some of our guests will hopefully give us some insight on that. We're also the supercharging in Europe. What is that? How does it look like? You know, are there going to be long lines piling up like it is out here with us in the States? And also the thing that everyone has seen, Tesla crashing into a jet. Oh my gosh, guys, I tell you. All that stuff is and more is going to be coming up on episode number 8, which starts right now. All right, again, thank you guys for coming out to another wonderful podcast that we have. Mike and Lewis, you guys look fantastic as always. Thank you for joining us.
Hey.
We do have a guest coming. His name is Balazs. He is an EV enthusiast from Hungary, and we're happy to have him join us today. So, Balazs, welcome. Come on in.
Join the party.
Hey guys.
Hey, Balazs.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks
Hey.
thanks for coming on, man. I know it's late. It's like a little after 10 o'clock there, right?
Yeah, it's past my bedtime, but whatever.
well, we thank you for joining us, man. You're really going to bring a lot to the table. We had some discussions before the podcast, and I'm really excited to have you here. So, can you tell a lot of the people who are listening and watching, what got you into EVs and how things are progressing out there in your side of the world?
Sure. So I guess I'm not the only TMCer who is a geek. So that's what got me into EVs.
Yeah, Lewis will give it to you.
It's funny because I was just thinking about this the other day that when I was a kid, I was like subscribing to like I don't know 15 different car magazines, but somehow it just faded, and I wasn't really interested in cars that much until I started to notice Tesla in around 2012. And then I started investing in Tesla in 2013, mid 2013. And that's when I joined TMC, by the way. And then it just got to the point where just annoying me so much, how much FUD I read in the Hungarian media about electric vehicles in general. And then on top of that, about Tesla. So I just kind of Googled which is the most popular electric vehicle website in the country. And I sent a note to the editor, hey, do you want someone who works for free part-time? Because I would love to, set the record straight and hopefully inform people. So we sat down at a mall. It was a little weird thinking back, like I still have both of my kidneys, so that's good. But I just met a random guy in a mall, and then I had this list of like 12 topics I wanted to cover within a year. And here we are 4 years later and 1,200 articles later. Now I'm doing this as a full-time job. I left my old job, which was at this little startup called ExxonMobil. I don't know if you heard about them.
Oh, wow.
That's where I was working while I was a Tesla enthusiast. So every time I was visiting Houston, the mothership, I was going to the Tesla store in the Galleria in Houston just to check out the cars. And then I just decided like a year ago, actually, that was it. Because of my investment in Tesla, I could afford to work for a lot less than I used to. And I just do this full time now, try to inform our readers about Tesla and the competition and other EV news as well.
How are your neighbors that are around you and your friends? So was anyone into EVs before you got into EVs? And if not, has your influence, because you're into it now, you're doing articles for it
Sure.
now. Has this influenced some of your friends? Like, you know what? Wow, Balazs is doing it. Maybe I should think about getting an EV. So have you kind of shifted some people's thoughts in your close circles?
Look, I think if we want to be honest, like all of us are on a mission to evangelize people into EVs. So of course I have, and I try to not to be pushy, but still somehow I managed to convince like one of my best friends actually bought an EV, and I'm pretty sure that I had a big part in it because I was talking about it all the time. So yeah, it's funny because I think for EVs and also for renewable energy like solar panels, seeing what your neighbor does kind of pushes you to make that step. Like we installed solar panels, I think 2 years ago on our home in the countryside. And my neighbor actually, whom I didn't talk to that much before just asked me for the number of the guy who installed it when they left because he wanted it to do it now. So I think that kind of this is how it works. And now another neighbor actually just see my car, is asking about EVs and talking about, well, he still can't afford one, but the next one is probably going to be an electric vehicle. So yeah, for sure.
What's the what's if money was no object,
Yeah.
in the Tesla world, and maybe you already can answer this question. What's the in your opinion, what's the most advanced Tesla that Tesla has? The X, the S, the 3. The 3 was the 3 was like this thing that a lot of people thought wouldn't come to existence. I think Mike even was like, you know what, I don't know if that's going to be a thing or not.
Me.
But then the 3 actually came to be one of the one of its biggest sellers.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Y is doing that. But in your opinion, what do you think? Which model do you think is the most advanced one that Tesla's done? Like, what this is what they all have. This is what Tesla has here.
Honestly, as much as it's fun to watch cars drag race, I couldn't care less. So I understand why people see the thrill in a Plaid for sure, but I'm still gonna say it's the Austin Model Y, the one with the new batteries and the structural pack and the front and rear casting. Like that's the most advanced Tesla has.
I know Mike. Lewis Above can talk about this, but Mike, what he brought up about the new Y is the construction of putting a pack into the frame of the car. I mean, with your experience in working with ICE vehicles, how do you think that will feel? Do you think it'll be a different kind of feel, more structurally sound now that the battery pack is a part of the car itself?
Well, Tesla's already pretty rigid, but that's where you're going to see the difference. I think most of it is the especially the guys that like to be track, because they're looking for every last bit of stiffness they can find to keep that car from deflecting under load. I just saw a pictorial that showed the Model 3 frame, and then they showed the picture of the Model Y with the new castings and everything, and they said the difference between these two frames is the reduction of 1,600 welds. I mean, that's really significant. Now, the trade-off, as we're all going to learn, is when you have a casting of that size and you get hit, the odds of the insurance company fixing it go way down. So we may see a lot of Teslas that become parts queens, not because they're really totaled. It's just it's too expensive to fix it, and so they'll get recycled as parts. But it's the way it goes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Lewis, the battery packs, because what Balazs just talked about, the battery packs. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but these new batteries are coming out. Just to kind of refresh people who are listening, if you can, what this new batteries pack means. What advantages does it have over what is currently out there?
Sure. I mean, I don't know anything about batteries, and I don't know why you're asking. I think it's it's an interesting thing. I mean, in my mind, there's two primary advantages to this change, the new batteries that they're doing to Tesla. One being manufacturing improvements, right? Where basically you're getting a lot of cost savings with simplifying certain things, not having all the welds, as Mike mentioned. The batteries are much larger, so it's more efficient in the material usage. But also there's some changes to the chemistry of the batteries. So basically there's potential to enable some additional things with charging and stuff in the future, higher charging rates and some other things like that. Currently there's no real advantage for users yet other than the structural change, which gives you probably a better power to weight ratio. But anyway, so what I'll say is there are some potential advantages in the future. But what we're seeing right now is or I should say the trade-off though is some of the performance. So that's why you're not going to see these batteries in the Plaids, for example, right now, because they're going to allow some charging cycle improvements. But their maximum output of power is not as high as some of the older batteries right now. So it's a trade-off, but you don't need that throughput. So it is a huge advantage to have in the 3 and the Y. I think, which right now is only in the Y. And I
Right.
believe the only models getting it are Tesla employee models. They're not even
Yeah.
releasing it yet to the general public, and that's because of testing, I'm sure, and also they want to. It's still a little R&D. They want to
Yeah.
make sure things are really polished before they do a wider release.
Yeah, I know. I know that's going to mean supercharging lines are going to probably increase now once people get the Model Ys. And so, Balazs, if you could tell us how is supercharging out there in Europe? Are there any areas of growth? Are there any places that you think they need to refine to make it better as more EVs come out there in your part of the world?
Yeah, I mean, first let's define if you only mean Tesla supercharging or you think about EVs in general and their charging, because there's a huge difference there.
Right, right, right.
When Tesla announced that they're going to start to open their charging network to others, first I was pretty skeptical. At this point, Elon Musk doesn't really need to prove that he knows what he's doing. Like he doesn't need my advice. And I was like, are you sure? Because this is like your biggest advantage. The charging landscape in Europe is so fragmented that if you were to drive, and remember within the EU, within the Schengen countries anyway, you don't even need a passport. Well, these days with Corona there were restrictions, but normally you can just drive from Budapest to France, and there's like no one's going to even bother to stop you. Like even if you go through Switzerland, which is not an EU country, they have an agreement with Europe, so it's like we can use our own ID cards. You don't even need a passport, and the chances are they're not even going to check on you, right? But with an EV, you would need to know, okay, along my way, what are the chargers that I'm going to use? Who operates them? Do I need a token? Do I need an app? What app do I need? Do they accept a credit card? Mostly they don't. You need to download their special app and then register your card there. Is it reliable? Is it going to work? And there are some solutions around that. Like, for instance, in Hungary, the biggest operator of the charging infrastructure here now has a roaming agreement with many European operators, so you can use their local app to charge your car, anywhere. But it's still more limited than a gas station where you just drive up to any gas station and you pay with your credit card, even if you don't have a single local currency in your pocket. Like in Hungary, we don't use euros, so like even if you didn't change any money, you could still use your MasterCard or Visa and just pay, and that's it. With Tesla, I just made a trip to Italy, which was my first long trip with my car, because I got my Tesla last November. And my first vacation really since COVID. And I took a trip to a little bit north of Milan. I was going to say Milan. So it was like Lake Como. I don't know if you guys heard about it. Just to, take a look and just spend some a little bit of time there. And I charged 4 times on the way there, all Tesla superchargers. It was just seamless. The car just planned it. So that's the biggest advantage Tesla has here, and they have a pretty good network already in Europe. In our neck of the woods, here in Eastern Europe, I would say that it's getting better and better. Like for the size of our country, Hungary, we already have 8 superchargers, and like our country is just roughly the size of, I looked it up before the show, so you guys can compare to something. It's roughly the size of Indiana. So that's what you have to deal with. But 3 of those chargers are around the capital, and then only 5 are around the edges of the country, around main highways. So like the difficulty you would have is, well, of course, if you're traveling to another European country using one of the major highways, it's fine. But if you want to travel within the country and you just take small country roads and you run out of charge, you're not going to have a supercharger. You're going to have to use some other network, and those are mostly 50 kilowatt and are mostly old. So they're not even going to give you more than 100 amps. So with your low voltage that you have with a Tesla, you're going to charge it like, I don't know, 30, 40 kilowatts at most. So you're going to grow old charging and regret your life decisions pretty much. But, it's going to take some time before Tesla covers like small rural areas of Hungary with chargers, of course.
How is the vibe out there for Tesla? Do people like Tesla out there? Are there Tesla haters out there?
Oh, just look at the comments on my articles. Of course, there are Tesla haters. But it's, I think in general, I think Tesla is liked within the EV community. Sure, some of the Tesla owners may have done a little bit to maybe appear a little bit snobbish and just talk down on people who didn't buy Teslas, so that maybe didn't help. But in general, I think people recognize the cars for what they are, how far they are, how far ahead they are from the competition. So it's in general it's liked, but for sure, it's not for everyone. And this is what I always say, like, you're never going to have a situation when everyone buys a Tesla, even if it's the best EV. People don't like the same design. Like, who is a BMW enthusiast? Sure, they're going to pick an i4. Why shouldn't they? It's a good car. It's a perfectly good choice. Not everyone has to buy a Tesla.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm a bit, right. You're right. The Kia is coming out. The Kia is coming out or has one out, and then Ford has their Mach-E. Do you talk about the Mach-E at all on your podcast at all?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we have
and what's your opinion
tested
about
it? Yeah, we have tested it, and honestly, my opinion is that it's a good car. It's the thing that I liked the most about it actually was the infotainment system, which is a funny thing to say, but in an EV, I think it's important that it helps, especially a novice user, to plan your trip. And that's like one of the other test advantages, right? I just sat in my car, typed in Lake Como, like the address of the hotel, and it planned everything and showed me how much I need to charge, where do I need to charge. That's not the default by any means in many EVs. And the Mach-E was one of the first ones. I think they have some Google-derived system which actually does that, so that's a big improvement. I think it's a good car. I don't think that it's better than the Model Y in terms of performance or range or charging capability. But if you don't like the Model Y design and you like the Mach-E design, it's a good choice. There are worse cars than a Mach-E.
You could use the what do they call it? The Super Pilot, Blue Pilot, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Whatever the thing is.
I think it's something with blue.
Super Cruise or something like that. Or
yes,
whatever.
I think could be. Is it the GM? Anyway.
Yeah. Were you able to use that? And if so, how do you think? How close is it? How close is it to Tesla's FSD?
Honestly, I haven't tried that because when I tested it, it was a very brief intro. They just brought like the first few units into the country, or it was maybe just a European tour of the first units, and we could see it for sit in it for like 15 minutes. This is what they call the static presentation. So they have some stupid names for these. And actually, our editor-in-chief was the one who tested it later on. And honestly, I don't recall like how he graded their version of autopilot, but I think that there are only very few driver assistance systems which are up to the autopilot level, and maybe Ford has some work cut out for them on that regard.
Now, Mike, if he doesn't mind me saying this, his daughter is going to be getting a BMW i3. So and you talked about or the FSD. I'm not sure what BMW calls it, but their autopilot system. So you were talking to Mike and saying how there's a new version of it coming out for BMW, the new that's closer to what Tesla's doing. What is your opinion on just the other EVs in your country? How are just overall is one closer to Tesla's full self-driving than others? Like is BMW's is it closer now than the Tesla's FSD?
So again, our editor-in-chief is the one who usually tests the autopilot features because he's kind of enthusiast on that side. He actually has OpenPilot installed, or he's using OpenPilot on his Nissan Leaf. And he told me that the new BMW iX3, which is made in China and has a different system, different drive assist system from other BMWs, is actually the first one that he has seen that's already very close to your standard autopilot features. But honestly, I don't think that people in general are super excited about driver assistant features. Like we are for sure, because we are enthusiasts, but normally people, like when they buy a car, I don't think it's a major decision point yet. Maybe when FSD is actually there and people can use true full self-driving, then it's going to be a differentiator if you have it or not. But for now, people just use lane keeping as an extra.
Yeah, I love FS. I love the beta. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, let's be clear. Full self-driving, you got eyes and hands. So that's the cheapest full self-driving we got, and I think so far the best.
You got a point there. You got a point there. But
It's called having a chauffeur. Costs a lot more than
Okay.
than FSD.
Have you seen the FSD prices lately? I'm not sure anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I just bought
In this
a Tesla.
country,
Yeah, I just bought a new Tesla. I was happy to pay the $12K for it. So I'm just a sucker for it. I loved it. I was in FSD beta back in when I had my old Tesla back in December up until February, and I loved it. I think it's a much further along than what the current FSD is in the current software. I think the beta is really getting us there, but it still has a little ways to go. Anyway, that's just me asking about what you thought about FSD. So if I could talk about Giga Berlin, that's been a big topic for a long time for a number of reasons, and I think you were able to go there and even be able to see some of the things that a lot of people wish they could have seen. Can you talk to us a little bit about Giga Berlin and how it is out there?
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, I haven't seen things I wanted to see. So here's what happened, right? They had this kind of, what do they call it? This event in last October, which was introducing locals to the factory, and I tried to get there. They actually contacted Tesla here in Hungary, and I couldn't get a ticket, even though the store manager of the Hungarian store is a high school classmate of mine. Even he couldn't get us get me a ticket, so then the factory opened and they had this event, and out of the blue, one of our readers IM'd me and said, "Hey, do you want to come? I have 2 tickets. You can be my plus one." I was like, "Where do I sign up?" Sure, let's go. But at that point, the only thing we had was the agenda that was there on Twitter. Like, someone posted it, I think one of the first buyers, and it said that, well, you're going to start with a factory tour at like 11 a.m. I was like, I have to be, like, I don't care who I need to bribe, I have to be there. And then, of course, it turned out that, and I don't know if it was for security reasons, because remember, by that time we had the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, and maybe with Starlink, Elon wasn't the most popular person with Putin. So I think they amped up security, but they didn't allow anyone to that factory tour except the first, I think, 30 people who bought the cars, and I'm sure some of the VIP politicians who attended the event. So we couldn't go there. We were only allowed to attend the party which followed, starting at 3 p.m. Even though we drove there, we made the what was it, like 1,200 kilometer trip? You tell me how much that is. That's in miles, but it's a lot. It was like a 12-hour drive.
A long day.
And yeah, so we went there and we couldn't get into that, but we could get into the party, and it was still worth it. First of all, because Elon made a surprise, kind of presentation and speech at that, so we could still hear him talk. Plus, I could chat with some of the employees there and just pick their brain about, the culture of the company there and what they are seeing. And, I learned some interesting things. Mainly that, in terms of the company culture there's a lot of young people who just came straight out of school, who basically are fine with that lifestyle of working 24/7, and it's a big party for them, and they right. After work they still go out to party together, and then they come back the next morning. You do that until you're like, I don't know, 30 or 40, and then you have kids and stuff, and then it's no longer that enjoyable. So there are some people, right? So some people don't like that much. We also know that Tesla is not the best in terms of salaries in the region. They are competitive in certain areas, but there are already some people whom other OEMs try to hire away from Tesla with higher salaries. So that's something they have to look out for. But altogether, people seem to be very happy with what they saw in terms of how agile the company is, how they are picking up things, and how they're changing things. And the people I've talked to enjoyed that part of the work for sure.
Were there any highlights that you particularly liked when you saw? Well, you didn't go to the actual event, but
right.
Was there anything that people were like, speaking about like, oh man, this was the greatest thing that happened there or whatever. Is there anything that you can remember that you might want to share with us?
The greatest thing that happened there. That's a good question. It's not that much that it's more that I actually talked to some people who were knowledgeable in the assembly, and they were talking about the final fit and finish. And they actually, one of them told me a story about they were coming from an OEM, another big German company, and they said that when this guy was there actually from the early days of the company starting. Because remember, for us it seems like the factory just started, but they started hiring people like a year ago, and some people were already there to set up the machines and to bring everything online. And this guy told me that he actually, when the first test parts went through the new machines in Berlin, the quality was better than at his last job at that luxury German brand. Yeah.
Wow. Because
So there is room for improvement in
Right,
Tesla
right.
for build quality, and I was actually checking that on the first cars they had there, because we could actually see those and sit in them, and like one of the things that if I look very closely on my Model 3, the things that I pick up on is like how the headlights are not perfectly aligned with the hood, and they seem like a little bit of an afterthought of whether they fit or not. Those were much better on the Berlin cars for sure. Now it's early days of production, so they do have time to care about every single car that comes up to a production line.
so there's still room for improvement. I got you. Is there so in response to Tesla's growth, VW is a big company. So
Mhm.
do you think that a major player like that is going to cause any any big competition for Tesla out in that part of the country or in that part of the world?
It's an interesting topic whenever people talk about competition. I always feel like there's this unrealistic expectation that Tesla would sell 100% of the EVs of the world, which is like, it's just not realistic. Like even Elon's crazy target of 20 million cars, which is like, I don't even know if I believe that, but that's what he says, 20 million cars. That would be like, like a fourth or a fifth of the global, production of cars. And that's his crazy target. So someone needs to build the other cars as well, right? So I do
Right.
expect that Tesla will lose market share, that others will build. That doesn't mean that Tesla can't grow and have a huge chunk in it. And some old players will go away. They will be bought up. They will cease to exist. Like with every technology revolution, not everyone will survive, but some will stay. And I think that VW has a good chance as long as they don't fire Dees, because he's like, really pushing that company. They are kicking and screaming, but he is doing his part. And every time I report on that, I read German media and try to
Hmm.
read some of the backstories that happen in the in within Volkswagen, and that it's a huge company, but it's almost like reading a Shakespearean drama of all the intrigue and who tries to
Oh
sabotage
yeah.
him, and then they leak something to the press on purpose, or
Uh-huh.
so it's not a done deal that they will come out of this. But I think with these they have a good chance.
So, Balazs, I want to ask you about Volkswagen with a slightly different perspective.
Hmm.
In my view, I think what we see with Volkswagen today, trying to adjust to the whole EV market, is a self-inflicted wound. And I say that because if I'm not mistaken, Europe was pushing diesels really hard for a long time.
Oh yeah.
That was their answer to gasoline. And then came Dieselgate, with
Hmm.
the Volkswagen kind of fudging the numbers a bit and really causing a lot of problems as far as acceptance of diesel as an alternative fuel. And I think in a way that kind of opened the door, kind of wedged the door open for the EV market to slip in there and say, hey, we got this great technology and it doesn't have all these problems that diesel has. Maybe you ought to look at us. So what's your thoughts on that? Am I just putting my tinfoil hat on and kind of going off the
I like Mike's
reservation
tinfoil
there?
hats. I love Mike tinfoil hats. So.
You know, the thing is that I remember when maybe in the U.S. it's, and I assume that most of your audience is from the U.S. So maybe from the U.S. it's weird that diesels were so popular in Europe, but they really were. And actually, that just allowed me, because actually I was expecting this question, so I just pulled up one of my articles from earlier this year.
Great minds think alike.
Because I do want to make an important distinction here. When we talk about diesel sales now, and we talk about the sort of the install base, to use an IT term, so the fleet, that's two different things. So even though you see a huge decline in diesel popularity since Dieselgate, and it's really like gone by 50% every single day, and then another 50% the next year. And in some countries these days, you have like 4 or 8% diesel penetration in the new car sales, where, that was like half the sales a couple of years ago. But right now you still see, and let me just pull this up, in the European fleet as of 2019, that almost 45% of the passenger vehicles in Europe were diesel. 45%.
That's
2019.
Really
Yeah.
Right? So it's going to take a while until all that, goes away and they age out. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, in many ways, it was a self-inflicted wound for Volkswagen. They're trying to save their image, and I think it's in a way, and it's always hard to say when something bad happens and there's a silver lining that, well, it was worth it. But in a way, I think it has really pushed them, and maybe Diess wouldn't have been able to push through his agenda had Dieselgate not happened.
That's my view, from the outside looking in. And I would ask a follow-up question. Does Europe tend to separate out the fleet diesel as far as heavy trucks, delivery trucks, versus the consumer, or is it just lumped together?
So in this statistics, which I talked about, this is the passenger vehicles.
Okay.
But I also pulled another number because I was writing an article a couple months ago and I needed the numbers. So I went into the European Union database for statistics, and I found that, and the actual number is not that important, but in terms of the usage of the fuels, and remember when we say fuel usage, it's not just passenger cars, as you say, it's trucks, it's ships, it's even locomotives or trains. But we use about 3 times as much gasoline. 3 times as much diesel as gasoline in Europe every single year, because of the industrial usage of diesel.
I have a question about Volkswagen, and I guess it's probably doing with their image. You remember when they had the whole issue with fudging the ECM numbers? You plug it up to do the
Dieselgate.
Is that what it's called? Because okay,
Yeah.
so because it was even wasn't also on gasoline cars as well, or just diesel cars?
So that was for diesels, yeah. For gasoline, I mean, there's this general issue of every emission data you see with every vehicle that uses the standard cycle, right? So, it's the same with, and especially an issue with plug-in hybrids and hybrids, where, we actually had some articles on this, not so long ago, where research has found that the hybrids and plug-in hybrids, surprise, surprise, emit several times as much in real life as it says on the sticker, because, that small battery can only give you that much when it's a standardized cycle. And sure, like our readers, sometimes some people are very touchy about this because they say, well, I have a plug-in hybrid and I charge it every night and I go to work in the city and I come back home and I almost never use the gasoline engine except when we go visit grandma 4 times a year.
Right.
But those are, our readers are a subset who are interested in this technology. They are mindful about this. That's not your average consumer.
Agreed.
And the other part that I was also just going to mention regarding that is that as long as companies, because many of these are company cars, right? So many people get a car from their company, and companies, like buying plug-in hybrids. But the problem is that as long as they give fuel cards to their employees, like regular fuel cards, you can go and refuel your car at Shell or whatever. The people are not incentivized to charge up their car, so they need these policy changes. Because I have already talked to many companies, mostly German companies are here in Hungary, but some of them already don't allow. There's a company policy that you cannot buy a pure ICE vehicle for a company car. It has to be a hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or electric, which is great. But as long as you don't follow up with your other policies, people are not going to charge up.
Well, there's a secondary part to that. So I've been at companies that have said, well, we'll give you a hybrid or we'll give you an EV, but there's no place to charge at the office. And when you approach them about it, it's like, well, that's a capital expense and we didn't budget for it and blah 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 blah. So
Yeah, the funny part about that is that whenever people think about charging, of course they think about the monster chargers, these
That's
300
right.
kilowatt, right? But at a place of work, you just really need like a standard socket, really, because the car is going to be there for like 8 hours, unless you are like a traveling sales agent. Sure,
yeah,
but it's
plug
like
it in and
you plug it in, you work like 8 hours, sometimes you work 10 hours. For sure, it's going to charge back that, small like 10% that you used to get to work. So it's really not that big of an expense unless they overdo it.
Interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about the EV incentives that are out there? Can you kind of walk us through how that works out there in your part of the world?
Yeah. So honestly, my biggest issue with the EV incentives is that it's not like I would love to have a European level solution for that. And I'm going to get to why in a moment, but let me give you two examples. I can talk a little bit about Germany because I know some about how the system works, and it's the biggest car market in Europe, so it's relevant. And I can obviously talk about the Hungarian system.
Right.
So in Germany, basically you get 9,000 euros for a full electric car. There is a subsidy for hybrids as well, or plug-in hybrids, but for EVs, for pure EVs, you have 3,000 euros, which is paid by the car company actually. So like Tesla's price is going to be 3,000 euros less than what it should be if the car qualifies for the incentive, if it doesn't fall outside of the threshold for the price. And then the state is going to give you back 6,000 euros after you bought the car. It's not a tax incentive like in the US. I'm not exactly sure how you get the money back. I'm sure you have to apply and stuff, but that's the basics of the system. And they are now talking about, changing that and making it less, and then eventually phasing it out. So that's the German system. In Hungary, it's a little bit different. It's the Hunger Games, maybe that's the best way to put it.
Well played.
Actually,
well played.
I actually applied for it twice and I won twice. So it's a little bit odd that I say that, but the first time I did that was the year before last year, 2020, because back then you could apply for, and actually try to convert some of the numbers so you guys wouldn't have to calculate Hungarian forints into dollars. I think I could have applied for something like $4,000 or the equivalent of that. And then I wasn't looking at the Tesla because Tesla wasn't officially available here at that time. Plus, I didn't even think it would qualify with the prices because we had a pretty low threshold for at least for the usable, the usable threshold. And then actually there was a second amount. So like if the car cost less than $32,000, you could get close to $7,000 back. So I was then looking for cars in that range, and there were some okay choices, and I actually applied for that, but then I didn't go through with it. And then the next year, so actually last year, I applied again, and it was, the thing is that there was a very small amount of money earmarked for this, and it was supposed to last for 2 years. It lasted for about an hour. People had to apply on this date. At like 8 a.m. in the morning, the whole system crashed because there was such a big, run for it.
Wow.
And actually, they were supposed to do it in like 3 phases, but then in the afternoon they decided to just do it all at once because the money was already gone for the first phase in like an hour, and the system couldn't even handle it. So there was this online system where you had to apply, given a bunch of data that the state already knows about you, so it was completely pointless. And then if you were lucky, then you were one of those roughly 1,200 people who were able to apply for this, because then after that the money ran out. So I was one of those lucky ones. That's how I got my Model 3 for a pretty ridiculous price given the car prices today. So when Tesla introduced the Model 3 in Europe, in Budapest, in Hungary last year, May 1st, early May, when they opened the shop here, the price was let me check it. It was about $43,000, which may seem like a lot for you guys because you guys have net prices and then you have lower sales taxes on that. But we have 27% of value-added tax. Plus, we have all the tariffs because it's made in China. It's coming into the European Union, right?
Right.
So, and then you have the logistics and all that. So it started, the standard range, 55 kilowatt hours, started at $43,000. And I could only apply if I went with the base version, like you couldn't even pick a color. Otherwise, it was already out of the threshold of the price. So that's how I got it. But the funny part is that my car right now, since the incentive ran out and Tesla has raised prices like 15 times, would cost 50% more than what I bought it for last May, and it was delivered in November.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That kind of hurts.
Now, lucky for me, but
doesn't hurt him.
Honestly, yeah,
right,
it doesn't hurt
exactly.
me.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess the worst part about the way the incentives work here is that it's just not, you can't plan with it. It's not like you have a 5-year plan and it doesn't have any like numbers it attached to like, okay, as long as, EVs are not more than 20% of new car sales, you can get back some of the taxes. It doesn't work like that. It's like, well, the government, is going to give you this much right now, but we're not sure it's going to exist tomorrow. This incentive. So that's a little bit of a bummer. Yeah,
It's
so
kind of crazy considering
yeah.
the tax. The tax is so high. You would think they could just say, "All right, you either don't pay VAT or you pay only a certain amount of VAT." You know what I mean? And then everybody could benefit from it.
and that's the other part. Like there's actually a great industry of importing German cars, especially in Eastern Europe, German EVs, because the incentives are so high over there, and you only have to keep the car for like 6 months in Germany according to the rules. So there are German companies who buy the car, hold it for 6 months. Get the incentive, and then you basically use the German car with German plates, which you can do in Europe, of course. And then 6 months later, you just officially buy it from them. So this is why I would say that I think the best would be if you had like a universal system in Europe. And I would just say, you know what, until EVs are, let's say, 20% of new car sales, or at least 20% of the installed fleet, whichever works, let's apply a 0% VAT universally in Europe, as a environmental whatever incentive, and then it's the same system everywhere, and it's no longer just the flavor of the day.
Gotcha.
Right.
So Balazs, tell us a little bit about the EV offerings that are in Europe that are not available here in the U.S. Like Seat, for example. What do you see as some of the best and worst EVs that are sold out in Europe but aren't necessarily here in the U.S.?
So, well, that's a good question. It's how to put this. So of course, there's a Volkswagen Group, right? They are the big ones,
Right.
and they have all these sub brands. And yes, some of these sub brands like Seat and Skoda here in Eastern Europe, which is very popular, those have their own EVs, but they are normally built on the same platform as their Volkswagen equivalents or the Audi equivalents, and they have the same specifications. So it's basically the same car with a different badge, little bit different styling, and a little bit different price point. So I don't really consider them different cars, which I'm sure that Volkswagen would be offended by. But
they're very different.
at that point, you can buy a Cupra, which is a Seat sports brand, but it's an ID3 repackaged in a slightly more sporty design. But even if you just squint, you can see that it's the same car from the side profile. So, but in terms of best cars which are not available in Europe, I would say. It depends on what your use case is, because of course in the US you guys use a lot bigger cars, right? And you use trucks, so like some of our cars are just not relevant for you. But here even a Model 3 is considered a big car. I mean, of course,
Wow.
obviously there's like bigger cars, right? Like a BMW 7, right? That's a bigger car for sure.
Right.
But it's no one would say that you have a small car if you have a Model 3. And the most popular cars in Europe are smaller ones. So the fact that Tesla is doing so well in terms of sales in Europe, which, just going back to our TMC collection of data that we do every single month, under the supervision of Troy and Hobbs, to collect all the official. So that's the official sales data from the European databases. Tesla sold close to 60,000 cars in Europe in Q1, which it could be off by a couple hundred, and then it would be number two. But if the numbers hold, it would be number one, and the entire Volkswagen group would be number two behind it in Q1, which would be a first, which never happened before. Like the Model 3 may have beaten like the ID3, but not the entire Volkswagen group. And this is before Berlin. Remember that. Like Berlin had like 30 cars delivered in Q1. So there's definitely potential there. But if you ask me about best cars in Europe, I'm sorry, long answer. The Renault Zoe was that's a French car. Renault is a French brand. I don't know how familiar you guys are with Renault.
Oh yeah.
Zoe was a relatively small car, definitely small car by US standards. That was very popular in Europe. It's now a little bit declining in popularity, but it was definitely good for a city runner, and it has a big battery. And finally, it has DC charging, even though it's only 50 kilowatts, but still. My previous car, my ICE car, was a Renault Megane, and now the first electric Megane just came out from Renault, which seems like a very good car in that sort of compact hatchback that Europeans love so much, like the Volkswagen Golf class and shape and size. And yeah, the ID3 is also a strong contender in that. So really, Tesla is in a league of its own, but it doesn't have the range, in sort of smaller cars that Europeans like so much.
Interesting question. Speaking of questions, Balazs, I'm going to put you kind of on the spot here. We got a question from one of our viewers here, and I'm not going to say his name, but he says, one important question is, how are these European OEMs planning to secure raw battery materials? I believe that would be the make or break key in surviving. What are your thoughts about that, Balazs?
I think that's correct. So, we used to joke about this, that whenever one of the big brands had an announcement of what they're going to do and how they're going to, trump Tesla, our line was, show me your battery factory, and then I'll believe you. Because for the longest time, they were thinking that, well, we're just going to buy batteries like we buy the ABS from Bosch. We're going to buy batteries from Samsung and CAT and whatever, except everyone was going for the same supply, from the same companies. And then to top that, they were actually, and I'm not sure, there's a debate within our editorial team whether it was actually something they believed or just marketing, where they said that, well, they're going to go, many of the European brands said they're going to go for solid state batteries. They're only going to invest in solid state batteries. Until then, they're just going to buy it. And then just if they actually meant it, imagine you're a supplier and they're telling the entire world, hey, we're not going to pony up the money to build this a factory for this obsolete technology for 3 years, because we're going to come up with a solid state battery in 3 years. We're going to buy it from this guy, this loser, who's going to build a factory for us. But we're going to leave them after 3 years because we have this super technology, the solid state batteries. Imagine how enthusiastic those suppliers may have been to expand their capacity for these companies. And we have moved on from that finally. So many of these companies like VW, even if these are joint ventures mostly, but they are starting to build actually some of these, their own battery factories. Some of these are coming online now. Except when you look at the design capacity, like Volkswagen is planning 6 battery factories in Europe within the next couple of years with a 40 gigawatt hour capacity each. That's kind of like what Tesla plans for Berlin once it's built out. And so, that kind of shows you the scale, but at least they are doing that. Now, then comes the next question that our audience is asking. Okay, so now you have your finally you realize that you need those damn factories to build cars, right? How are you going to get it's not going to be like ordering it from your suppliers. And what I have been reading lately is that some of these companies are now actually going directly to the mining companies and the refineries and talking to them like Tesla does, because that's the only way.
Has this whole Ukraine-Russia thing, has that put any kind of pressure in your part of the world in terms of getting those materials for the cars, or for fuel prices? Has that has it factored a lot into anything in your world? This whole Ukraine-Russia war.
Well, I mean, obviously it has affected, a lot of things. Like for one, our country has a border with Ukraine, even if it's a small border, but you know, that's still there. Um, the immediate effect that, and I don't know if this was even communicated or it was media even picked it up in the U.S., but the biggest effect immediately was that there were many, many suppliers working in Ukraine, and sometimes, some of them in Russia as well, but many in Ukraine, especially key ones which are making, it's going to be one of the stupid examples that maybe Elon would bring up when he talked about, how they were running around to get the USB cables for the original Model S because they couldn't get any. But it's, as stupid as that they were making, these Ukrainian companies or these factories in Ukraine were making the cables for many, many cars, not just EVs, but many cars. And those factories shut down, or supply just wasn't insured after a while. So many European factories had to shut down for weeks. Volkswagen had to shut down not just ICE but also electric vehicle factories. So there was a huge thing about that, and even today it's not fully back online. So after COVID and after the chip shortage, this came. So now prices of cars are sky high, and you have to wait like 1 or 2 years for a new car, any car, basically. So that's a bummer. But then in terms of EVs and the raw material prices, Russia is actually responsible for some of that market. So the raw material prices, I don't know if you guys have seen the thing about the nickel price, which went up in the London, metal exchange, like spiked up to like, I don't know, 5 times of what it used to be, or something like that, something crazy. That has obviously affected a lot of things. You have to bear in mind, though, that many of these companies have long-term contracts with suppliers. So it's not like, they're not going to have an issue tomorrow. But, once those agreements run out, they have to renegotiate, and then it's going to be a problem.
Yikes, that just sounds bad. Has anything this is maybe may not be EV related, but has that whole dynamic between those two countries, has that done anything else to your part of the world? Has it made anything difficult for things out there for you, not just EV related?
hmm Actually, let me bring a positive example. And again, I want to be extremely careful here because, and especially, the other thing in Hungary is that we have a Hungarian minority living in Ukraine who are also directly impacted. So, in no way do I want to say that there's a silver lining of the war and, none of that. But you still have to mention that it seems like for once, and it's kind of difficult to say when the European Union thinks something, says something that's actually meant like a big change, because usually they make a big announcement, like a big plan, and then it takes 3 years to ratify that, and then all of the special interest groups just kind of loosen it up by the time it's actually there. But for now, it looks like we're actually going to make a big change towards renewables, because they want to cut the dependency on Russian fossil fuels, which, on the one hand, like in Hungary, 2 out of 3 people, I guess, or at least half the country is heating in the winter with gas, and 80% of that comes from Russia. In some countries, it's 100% or 50%. So it's not just industry; it's actually people's homes where they cook, and they don't want to freeze to death. So it's not a trivial question of, well, the ideals and we just give it up. It's these governments actually have to solve the issue of what's happening in next. You have until next October to solve it. Good luck, right? Building out terminals for LNG in 4 months. So anyway, but it looks like Europe wants to do like a shorter term solution of finding alternate sources, at least for oil, because I think like over 90% of the oil already comes into Europe on ships. So, those could in theory come from other areas. But on the longer term, or even on a midterm, I think it's going to accelerate our transformation into clean energy and battery storage. So, Giga Berlin better scale up that battery fab.
So out over here in America, kind of shifting gears a little bit. Over here in America, there is we mentioned this earlier, that there's a lot of Tesla hate out here in America, and you mentioned there's some out there in your neck of the woods. Just a few days ago, we had but there was a Tesla that actually crashed into a jet. And oh my gosh, this thing, a few weeks ago we had some rocket scientists jumping a Tesla Model S
Yeah.
In a street that totally just crashed it. That was ridiculous. But now we have this. In case of those of you who didn't know about this, there was an actual Tesla vehicle that ran through, hit an actual jet. We're not sure if it's a Model Y or a X. Looks like it might be. It looks like it might be an X. I'm not,
I
you
think it might
guys
be an
look-
X. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you might be right.
But there's a lot of articles, not a lot. There's a few articles that mention that this was on autopilot, and I guess it's kind of depends on how you look at it, because the summon service, it was actually summoned, so someone was summoning it to wherever they were. So if you look at the FSD beta, the FSD option, it says summon is under it. So in some ways you can kind of say that it's part of the FSD, but it's kind of like it's a separate thing. It's like, you don't have to necessarily be in the car to use summon, whereas in full self-driving you have to be in the car to do it. So when you hear things like this that's going on, with Tesla and people bashing on it, what does that make you think, as someone who writes for EVs and someone who is in the EV industry, community? How does this make you feel about Tesla? Do you think there's because there's Mach-E's out there, there's some Rivians out there, and they might have some issues where they might hit something, but you're not really hearing things about those. But little things like this, it's like, full self-driving, here we go again, this car is doing something on its own, and it just, in my opinion, it makes people afraid to get into electric cars, specifically Teslas, because I don't want the car to go crazy and drive into something. So do you think this kind of, and so TMZ.com is a gossip site. They're the ones that talked about, the car was on full self-driving.
You are being generous with that gossip
yeah.
site.
Well, but they're like, it's just full self-driving. And then they also mentioned this other incident in Texas where these two gentlemen were in a Model S, I believe, and they crashed to a tree, and everybody's like, oh yeah, no one was in the front seat, and then the NTSB came out and did a report saying, no, people were in the front seat, they were in seat belts, and because of how the steering wheel was deformed, it was someone had actually hit that and deformed it. So all that said, how does that make you feel in terms of the Tesla brand? Does it make you think that, wow, this company is not, who's running the ship? Do you think it's this kind of stuff that they're talking about is warranted, or do you think it's just people just trying to just embellish it because it's a Tesla and it's just the next big thing that's out right now?
And this is kind of my general answer in terms of all of these autopilot accidents that are being reported and FSD accidents and all of that. Obviously, these have to be investigated, right? So we want to have safe cars, right? And then if Tesla screwed up and it's not safe, they should fix it.
Right.
But in general, if I take my 15-year-old car, which has standard, this what do you call it, the tempomat, the kind of the speed
Cruise control.
Cruise control. That's the one. Thank you.
Yep.
That's what I was looking for. So you have standard cruise control, and I set it to 100 miles, and I just let go, and crashes into something. Is it Ford's, issue? Is it GM's who made it, or am I the moron who did it? So as long as it's not the machine, as long as Tesla didn't say that, you're going to summon the car, you don't have to touch anything. You just, click, pick me up, and it picks you up. As long as they didn't say that, I think it's the owner's fault. Whoever was holding that phone and just, looking at the plane and the car, and they just didn't care. You can also think about whether it was staged for use, although it was a pretty expensive stunt if anyone, did it. But sometimes you have a feeling like that's happening. But let me bring in something else that's kind of related. The autopilot accidents with the police vehicles, on the side of the street where Tesla crashes into police or fire trucks. The part that infuriates me about how the media handles that is not that Tesla is in a bad light, because, well, what's new, right? But
Right.
but the fact that that's a problem for every car that has a radar ADAS system, because these systems, by their design and the way they work, are not always able to pick up stationary objects and stop. So this is not a Tesla problem. This is a problem for everyone who has a similar system. And if a fire truck was on the side of the road, another company's car could have crashed into it. Maybe they have, you just don't hear about it.
But
We have this saying in Hungary that it's, how do I translate it? That it's not breaking news if the dog bites the postman, but it's breaking news if the
Right.
postman bites the dog, right?
okay,
So,
let's be clear about something here, and you don't see the CEO of Mercedes or the CEO of Volkswagen, standing up in front of the press saying, "My full self-driving owns the world. I've got the best there is." That just puts a big bullseye on you.
well, I mean, Mercedes did run an advertisement saying they have a full self-driving car. They just tried to forget about it because it happened a couple of years ago and they realized they shouldn't have done that, for instance.
That's true.
Sure, Elon oversells these things. Does it give you the license to just use it irresponsibly? I don't think so.
Guess it depends
But
if you're
you're
a
right.
lawyer or not.
I am not a fan of his projections on FSD. I think my knowledge of IT, having some IT education, but by no stretch of imagination am I a programmer, but I know enough to know how difficult it is, and I just don't think that those projections are realistic. I think that Tesla's going to get there, but they're not going to get there in a time frame that Elon suggests. So
Yeah.
yes, maybe he should be more careful in what he projects, because some stupid people are going to misuse
Right.
it.
Well, Elon did a tweet, I think back in July. He said, current summon is sometimes useful, but mostly just a fun trick. Once we move summon and plus highway driving to a single FSD stack, it would be sublime. Now, I've used summon a couple times. One time I was impressing a girl, and it was just I saw the car. We were in the same parking lot,
The
and I
ultimate
saw
party
the car.
trick.
Yeah, I saw the car there, and so
Did-
I
did
had
you-
walked.
Did you crash into a plane as well? Was
No,
that
no,
another trick?
no. But my point is, we were in the same kind of parking lot area, and I had walked into a car, and I was like, "I said, oh, can I walk you back?" I said, "No, don't walk back to my car. My car come to me." So I did all the thing, and it just drove up, and it stopped, and it parked there, and it was great, So I was, and it was my first time ever doing it. I was like to myself, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is cool." But then
Mark's
later
going,
on,
yeah.
right. But then, so later on, I got really cocky about it, and then I was at Best Buy or something. And I said, you know what? Let me. No one was around. I said, let me have it come around to me. And actually, what happened is it came out. I saw it, but then it went down the parking structure, and then it was coming back. So I just stopped it because I didn't know where it was going. But it wasn't going to hit anything. It just didn't come directly to where I was. It was going to take a long way around. So. I agree with Elon that there's a lot of room for improvement, but if it's a relatively wide space with no barriers around it, I think it's actually pretty cool. I think it actually can work.
But that's not California, so
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah. I can only imagine. Anyway.
Yeah, honestly, in terms of summon, I do think it's a party trick as well. And like there's like one use case that's legitimate, like it's pouring, it's raining very heavily, you're coming out of a shopping mall, theater, cinema, whatever, and you don't have to walk across the parking lot in rain. The car picks you up. If that works, cool, that's a good use case. But the way I think about summon is that even if it's not really useful at this point, or it's just a trick, it's inevitable that the car has to park itself and pick up the owner for full self-driving. So it's one of the building blocks of FSD, so it has to do that. They kind of try to release it early to generate some buzz. I'm not sure it's very useful at this point.
I got you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they've updated the software in it in
Yeah.
several years even. I'm pretty sure it's the original software stack. So it'll be interesting to see how it works once they do move it over. As the tweet said with Elon, like once they move it over to using the new modern software stack, the new neural nets that they're using for the beta, maybe it'll actually be worth
Here
using.
comes Mike.
honestly, I
goes
think
Mike.
yeah. So I had the distinct pleasure of sitting at a supercharger just a few days ago with great entertainment around me, and that was watching people try to back up into their spot. And I was thinking that instead of the party trick of summoning, why don't they get it worked out where the car can actually back up to the supercharger and get it right? I mean, some of these people had some real struggles trying to figure out how to do this.
It's funny you mentioned that. I did that one day. I was at the Glendale Galleria up here. This was in the pandemic, and so I said, let me go up here and try it because why not? So I got out, and then you can press the stalk twice, and then it puts the car into like it'll back up for you.
It's supposed to be park mode. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it's called. Yeah, so I did that, and it's like which direction got out, closed the door, and it actually went in and stopped, and it worked. So I was like,
Well,
no one
there's
was
some.
around.
Yeah, I read the manual on that because I was going to try it, but there's some very clear limitations.
Yes.
On the self parking.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
But-
honestly, in general, not just for Tesla, but I'm yet to see, and maybe just my limited experience because I don't do all the vehicle testing for sure, but I'm yet to see a park assist which would park where I couldn't, right? Because that's where it would be useful. Like imagine, like a town, and again in Europe we have older cities, so narrower streets in the
Sure.
downtown area, for
You
instance.
park on the
Very-
sidewalk.
You park on the sidewalk, and sometimes they park on both sides of the sidewalk, and you really only have like 0.9 lane left to cross. So I would
Sounds
love
like
to
Paris.
have the car parked there because I can't. But at this point, you're lucky if it doesn't destroy your rims when it's parking at a Walmart.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I wouldn't pay for it. Like I didn't buy the FSD package for my car because the price would have been just ridiculous for the service it offers now. Now, once it actually does FSD, that's a different ballgame. I may buy it then, but automatic parking, summoning for now, I don't really think these are useful at this stage in this development
you.
phase.
I got you. We got a question from Amin, and Amin says, my next question would be now that Tesla Giga Berlin is up and running, Tesla will be looking into the next European factory. What country would be the best for Tesla in your opinion, Balazs, and why?
It's interesting because a lot of people are talking about the UK, and Tesla will have its reasons if it goes for the UK. I have absolutely nothing against the UK. It's not a personal
Other
grudge.
than
They're not European anymore, so I mean it doesn't count.
They've always been like that. If they could, they would take their island and swim away further into the ocean with it. But I mean, joking aside, the point of bringing a factory within the EU is bringing it within the EU tariff zone.
Sure.
So you don't have to pay extra on, as we're talking about this before the broadcast, actually the way this gets calculated is they add the VAT on top of it. Well, they actually add the logistics or the transportation cost, like if you ship in the car from China, and then on top of it they add the VAT, the value-added tax, which in our case in Hungary it's 27%, and then on top of that they add the tariffs, right? So it adds up pretty quick. So if you put a car factory in the UK, it's no longer in the EU. Now the EU and the UK have a special relation. It will take ages for them to figure out what costs what, but I think they're moving into the direction where they're not going to try to, cause more harm to each other than necessary. So it very well may be that if a car is made in the UK, it doesn't pay any, taxes or tariffs if it ships into Europe. So at that point, it may work. I don't know.
I'm
I mean,
going to put a personal request into Elon. I want the next Gigafactory down by Barcelona because I need an excuse to go back to Barcelona.
yeah.
That's my request. Just saying.
A lot of people bring up why Tesla just doesn't buy a factory of another car company which is not doing so well. Yeah. So there are always rumors that Volkswagen is going to just kind of give up on the Seat brand actually because it's not selling well for ages within the Volkswagen group. But I don't think that buying an existing car, factory would be beneficial because there are a lot of baggage which comes with an existing factory that they would have to pay for. So
Fremont.
We saw how that worked in Fremont.
That's right.
Yeah, they should
Yeah.
build
They
new
got
factories.
it to work finally, but it was a long
Took a
struggle.
long time.
Yeah. So Balazs, your question about lease buyouts. So Tesla just informed us that they're not letting newer leases buy out their car. All Tesla vehicles delivered on or about April 15th of this year are not eligible for the purchase. Third-party dealerships and third-party individuals are not eligible to purchase lease vehicles. So what do you think about that? How does that does that sour the water for you with EV, with Tesla in specific? Does it make you feel like, ugh, or do you think it's not a big deal?
Honestly, I mean, in terms of changing the rules in anything, as long as it only applies for new people going into the deal, I think it's fine because you either sign the lease with them, or you may choose another type of financing, maybe not financed by Tesla, and then you do whatever you want with that car. I'm more interested in the reason why they do that, because originally people were saying that this is not the first time Tesla has indicated that it's going to do something like this. And originally people were saying that they want to do that because they are thinking about self-driving cars, and they want to kind of have their own fleet of robotaxis. And then, once the lease is up, they're going to use it. They're not going to resell it. But we are like years away from
Yeah, I don't
that.
think that's the reason.
Yeah.
Right. So at this point, I'm thinking that used car prices are probably just as high in the US as they are in Europe, because new car prices are up because you have to wait ages for cars. So it's just a better deal for them to sell it themselves, I guess.
So
I agree with you. I think that's the reason. I think they're going to make way more money selling the used car than they are from having leasers buy out the car to then flip it and sell it themselves, right? Because that's most likely what people are going to do.
No, I am.
I mean,
curious.
like my example, like my car, even if you don't look at the incentive, which is no longer there, right? But as I was saying, it cost, when I bought it, the full price would have been $43,000, and right now it costs 56, so like $13,000 more. Sure, the new one has the slightly bigger battery, the 60 pack, not the 55. Is the Ryzen processor, not the Intel one. Okay, but still, I'm pretty sure that if I sold it, I could sell it for more than I bought it. It's 6 months old.
Now, I am curious, and this is more addressed to Lewis and Mark. Balazs, if you happen to know, that's great. But when I looked for a Tesla back in November, I actually looked at a couple of the companies that offer you the chance to buy out somebody else's lease, take over a lease or whatever. And I remember reading the lease fine print, and everyone I looked at, you were not allowed to buy out the lease at the end of a Tesla, even in November. So I'm a little confused why it's all news now, but it seems to have been in place for quite a while.
I think it was the Model 3. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was the Model 3 and Ys that you were not allowed to.
So
in the
specific
Model
to the
S and
model.
X you could.
Interesting.
And I think that's what the change is now. You can't for any car. I'm pretty sure. I'm not
Yeah, 'cause
100%
I was
on that,
looking
but
at the
I
threes.
believe
I'll admit, I was looking at the threes.
I
only.
believe the 3s and Ys they did not let you buy
Interesting.
them before. Just because again, it's a much cheaper car. They know the resale value would hold. So I believe that was the difference.
There we go.
yeah, I know.
Now everybody's equal.
I know. So Balazs, I know it's getting late for you out there, and we can talk more about this stuff. But I really want to thank you for coming out tonight and staying up late for us cats over here in America. Before you go, can you just tell us more about your sites and any social media links that you want to just give to our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, I think it wouldn't help much if I started to, just give you the links in terms of just speaking about the links, because you probably couldn't, viewers probably couldn't spell it. Plus, it's all in Hungarian, so it would be very beneficial for your Hungarian viewers, but I think that's a minority. So, I think because Villanyautósok.hu is the name of the site. Those who speak Hungarian can probably spell it. And it's the biggest Hungarian EV site and renewable site, so people can visit us there. We have a weekly podcast for the past 122 weeks now. So they can listen to that as well. And we are not really good at social media because we are kind of my age. So we always drag our feet to post anything on Instagram. I did post some stuff when I was in Berlin at the party, but you can still follow us on Twitter and Instagram as well.
Fantastic, and of course, I guess you got the memo with Mike and Lewis with the hair, the kind of the hair.
This is the
style.
look.
Hey man,
So,
That's why I
cool.
did it. I was thinking ahead of this podcast. Like,
it's all good,
Excellent.
man. You're still my dude. Anyway, Balazs, we thank you for coming out, and Mike and Lewis, what can I say? I love you guys. Thank y'all for making this fun and bringing your expertise to it as well. So this is going to wrap it up for episode 8 for us today on the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please, of course, like and subscribe. We want to hear what questions and comments you may have. So please share with us in the podcast section over at TeslaMotorsClub.com or also in the YouTube comments. Also, if you'd like to support the podcast, please consider becoming a supporting member on the TMC website. You can follow us on social media. The links are down in the description. All the cats behind the scenes, Danny, Doug, Adam, James, Joshua, those cats rock. They put this together. We thank them as well. And again, we thank you all for listening to us, for being with us today on this beautiful day. And again, for Balazs for staying up late for us. But that's going to wrap it up for episode 8. We'll see you guys really soon. Look out for when we're going to come up next. We'll have another guest coming soon, I think, if I can say that. For now, as Mark, Lewis, and Mike, we're out. Have a good evening. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.